Staff Sergeant James Davidson stood at his post inside the HMS Churchill's main conference room. His dark blue marine dress uniform felt stiff, but he kept his posture perfect. 6 months ago, when aliens had first contacted Earth, no one would have guessed he'd end up here, serving as security on a British ship during humanity's first diplomatic meeting. The room buzzed with excited whispers. Scientists and diplomats from Earth moved around, checking their notes one last time. Emma Blackwood, the lead British diplomat, caught his eye and gave a small nod. Davidson returned it slightly. He had worked with her during the past week, and she was good at her job, calm, smart, and careful with her words. "They're here," someone announced over the ship's speakers. Davidson's hands tightened behind his back. Through the large window, he watched as the alien ship moved closer. It was huge, at least 3 times bigger than the Churchill, and looked like polished silver in the starlight. The first aliens walked into the room 10 minutes later. Davidson kept his face blank, but inside, his mind was racing. They were tall, almost 7 feet, with gray-blue skin that seemed to shine. Their muscles showed clearly through their tight uniforms, making them look like bodybuilders. 4 of them were guards, carrying weapons Davidson had never seen before. The 5th one, wearing elaborate robes, was clearly their leader. "Welcome aboard the Churchill," Emma said, stepping forward with a practiced smile. "I'm Emma Blackwood, Earth's diplomatic representative." The alien leader looked down at her, his silver eyes studying her face. "I am High Commander Krell of the Alderaan Empire," he said in perfect English. "We have been most interested in your species." Davidson didn't like how he said those words. Something felt off. He glanced at the alien guards, noting how they positioned themselves around the room. It was too much like combat formation for his liking. The meeting started normally enough. They talked about trade, sharing technology, and setting up regular meetings. But then Krell asked something strange. "We have studied your military records," he said, still watching Emma. "Your species is physically weaker than most we've encountered, yet you've survived and thrived. We find this fascinating." Emma shifted slightly, the first sign of unease Davidson had seen from her. "We make up for our physical limitations in other ways," she answered carefully. Krell smiled, showing teeth that looked too sharp. "Yes, that's exactly what makes you perfect for our studies." Everything happened fast after that. The alien guards raised their weapons. Davidson moved instantly, years of training kicking in. He grabbed Emma and pushed her behind him, reaching for his pistol. "Stop," Krell ordered. "Your weapons cannot harm us. Our shields would block them anyway." He walked closer, looking at Davidson with interest. "Ah, a Marine. Even better. Your kind are known for exceptional endurance." "What do you want?" Davidson demanded, keeping himself between the aliens and Emma. "Specimens," Krell said simply. "Your species has qualities we wish to study. Your physical endurance, your ability to adapt, your surprising resilience, these are traits worth investigating." One of the guards fired his weapon. Davidson felt his muscles freeze up. He fought against it, managing to stay standing longer than he should have, but eventually dropped to his knees. Through blurring vision, he saw more aliens entering the room, taking humans away. "Remarkable," he heard Krell say. "He's still conscious. Most species would be completely paralyzed by now." The alien leader leaned down to look at Davidson's face. "You'll do very well in the arena, Marine." Davidson tried to speak, tried to move, but his body wouldn't respond. The last thing he saw before everything went dark was Emma being carried away, her face showing fear, but also determination. He made a silent promise to find her, no matter what this arena was. As consciousness slipped away, one thought stayed clear in his mind. These aliens had made a big mistake. They thought humans were weak. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Davidson woke up with a pounding headache. The floor beneath him was cold metal, and bright lights hurt his eyes when he opened them. He sat up slowly, his Marine training kicking in as he checked himself for injuries. Nothing seemed broken, but his muscles felt stiff. "Finally awake, mate," a British voice called from nearby. "You've been out for nearly 12 hours. Davidson turned to see a muscular man with short brown hair sitting on a bench in the next cell. The man wore torn military pants and a gray shirt that had seen better days. "Name's Oliver Bennett. Most folks call me Ollie. Former SAS," the man said. "Been here 3 weeks now." "Staff Sergeant James Davidson, U.S. Marines," Davidson replied, standing up carefully. His cell was about 10 feet square, with clear walls that looked stronger than glass. "Where exactly is here?" Ollie pointed up through the clear ceiling. Through it, Davidson could see other levels of cells rising up like a massive tower. "Welcome to the Alderan Empire's Grand Arena. Think Roman Colosseum meets Alien Fight Club." Before Davidson could ask more questions, heavy footsteps approached. 2 Alderan guards stopped in front of his cell, along with a tall human man wearing an expensive-looking black suit. The human's gray hair was perfectly styled, and he carried himself like someone used to giving orders. "I'm Lord William Bedford," the man said with a posh British accent. "I manage human affairs in the arena." "Let's be clear, Sergeant Davidson. You're here because the Alderans find our species fascinating. They believe testing our limits will help them understand how such a physically weak species has survived so long." Davidson stood straight, staring directly at Bedford. "You work for them, against your own people." Bedford smiled coldly. "I work with them, and I suggest you do the same. Cooperate, and you'll be treated well. Fight back," and he shrugged. "Well, let's just say the arena can be very unforgiving." After they left, Ollie spoke up again. "Don't mind Lord Git. He sold out to the Alderans years ago. Now he helps them run their little experiments." "What kind of experiments?" Davidson asked, examining his cell for any weaknesses. "Combat trials mostly. They pit us against other species, or make us run these mad obstacle courses designed for aliens 3 times stronger than humans." Ollie's face darkened. "Lost 2 good mates last week. They weren't soldiers, just scientists who couldn't handle the physical stress." Davidson thought about Emma, wondering if she was somewhere in this facility. "How many humans are here?" "In this tower. About 50. Mostly military folks now. They learned civilians don't last long enough to be entertaining." Ollie stood up and walked closer to the wall between their cells. "But here's the thing they haven't figured out yet. They're so focused on strength that they're missing what really makes humans dangerous. Our endurance," Davidson said, remembering Krell's words on the Churchill. "Exactly. These Alderans, they're like sprinters. All power, no stamina. They can lift 3 times what we can, but they tire quickly. I've been watching them." Ollie grinned. "And I'm not the only one. There's a whole network of us here, passing information, learning their weaknesses." A loud buzzer sounded, making Davidson's headache worse. The cell door slid open. "Showtime, mate," Ollie said grimly. "First test is always the worst. They like to break in the new arrivals quickly." He pressed his hand against the wall. "Remember, they expect us to be weak. Use that. Make them underestimate you." Davidson stepped out of his cell, 2 guards immediately flanking him. As they led him away, he heard Ollie call out one last time. "Oh, and Davidson, if you see someone with a white armband in the arena, trust them. They're part of the network. We look after our own here." The guards led Davidson through long corridors that slowly sloped upward. He could hear roaring sounds growing louder. A crowd, he realized. They were taking him to an actual arena. His mind raced, cataloging everything he saw. Guard positions, door mechanisms, camera locations. He might be a prisoner now, but James Davidson was still a Marine. And Marines always planned for victory, no matter the odds. The arena was huge. Davidson stood at one end, looking up at rows of alien spectators that rose hundreds of feet into the air. The ground beneath his feet was covered in blue sand that felt slightly warm. He wore the simple gray outfit they'd given him, but he'd managed to keep his boots, standard Marine issue, broken in just right. Human contestant Davidson. A loud voice boomed overhead. Your trial begins now. You must reach the other side of the arena. Failure to complete the course will result in punishment. Davidson studied the obstacle course in front of him. It was clearly built for the tall, strong Eldorans. The walls were 15 feet high. The jumps were too wide for human legs, and the climbing ropes were spaced for beings with much longer arms. From a private box high above, Lord Bedford watched with several Alderaan officials. He won't last 5 minutes, one alien said. The course requires at least triple human strength levels. Bedford wasn't so sure. He'd seen something in Davidson's eyes, something different from the other humans. Davidson started moving. Instead of charging straight at the first wall like most contestants, he jogged along its length, studying it. The crowd started booing, but he ignored them. There, in the corner, where the wall met another section, the angle was slightly off. He backed up 20 feet, then ran forward. His boot hit the corner joint perfectly, and he pushed off, using the angle to propel himself higher than he should have been able to go. His fingers caught the top of the wall, and he pulled himself up smoothly. In the viewing box, the Alderaan official leaned forward. Interesting. He found a weakness in the construction. The next obstacle was a series of platforms floating in the air, too far apart for a human to jump between them. Davidson looked at them for just a moment, then did something unexpected. He lay down on his platform and started rocking it back and forth. What is he doing? Someone in the crowd shouted. Davidson kept rocking the platform until it was swinging widely. Physics was physics, even on an alien world. When the swing reached its peak, he jumped. The momentum carried him much further than a standing jump could have. He landed on the next platform and immediately started rocking it too. He's using the course's own movement against it, Bedford muttered. Clever bastard. The final section was the rope climb. The ropes hung 30 feet apart, easy for an Alderaan's arm span, impossible for a human. Davidson studied them, then looked at the arena walls. A smile crossed his face. He grabbed his rope and started swinging it, building momentum. Instead of trying to reach the next rope, he swung toward the arena wall. His boots hit the surface and he ran along it, using the rope like a pendulum to move forward. The crowd went silent, watching as he essentially ran sideways across the arena, using the wall as his ground. When he reached the finish line, Davidson dropped to the ground and stood at attention. Just like after a Marine training course, the arena was completely quiet. Then one alien started clapping, then another, and suddenly the whole crowd was cheering. They'd come expecting to see a human fail. Instead, they'd seen something new, something that made them question their assumptions. Bring him to my office, Bedford ordered, his face thoughtful, and get me his complete service record. I want to know everything about this Marine. Later, cleaned up but still sore, Davidson sat across from Bedford in a luxurious office overlooking the arena. That was quite a show, Bedford said. You broke every expected approach to the course. Made quite an impression on our Alderaan friends. Marines adapt and overcome, Davidson replied simply. Sir. Bedford smiled. Indeed. Well, Sergeant, you've earned yourself an upgrade. Better quarters, better food. Keep performing like that, and you might find yourself in a very interesting position. He paused. Of course, if you're planning anything foolish, trying to escape, for instance, remember that we still have your diplomat friend, Miss Blackwood. Her comfort depends entirely on your cooperation. Davidson's face showed nothing, but inside, his mind was racing. Emma was alive and somewhere in this facility. Now he had a reason to play along. For now. Understood, sir, he said. When's my next trial? Bedford laughed. Oh, you're going to do very well here, Sergeant. Very well indeed. Davidson watched the Alderaan guard closely through the glass wall of Dr. Whitmore's lab. The alien was huge and strong, but after just 10 minutes of continuous exercise, it was breathing hard. See that? Dr. Whitmore pointed at her computer screen. Their muscle mass is incredible, but their endurance is poor. They burn energy 3 times faster than humans do. Like a sprinter versus a marathon runner, Davidson said, remembering his earlier conversation with Ollie. Exactly. She pulled up more data. They evolved on a high-gravity world. They needed strength just to move around, but they never developed our stamina. Most Alderaan physical activities are short and explosive. They don't understand how humans can keep going for hours. The door opened, and Ollie walked in with another person wearing a lab coat. "Meet Thomas," he said. "He's our tech expert. Show him what you found." Thomas pulled out a small device. "I've been studying their arena control systems, the force fields, the obstacles. Everything runs on timed power cycles. They have to recharge every few hours." He looked at Davidson. "Including the cells." Davidson understood immediately. "How long is the recharge gap?" 3 seconds. Not long enough to escape normally. Thomas smiled. "But maybe long enough for someone who knows it's coming." Dr. Whitmore turned off her computer. "We need you to keep fighting in the arena, James. But now you'll be fighting with a purpose. Every match teaches us more about Alderaan biology." And she lowered her voice. "We found Emma." Davidson's head snapped up. "Where?" "Level B3, Research Wing 2. They're using her in diplomatic behavior studies." She handed him a small pill. "If you get a chance to see her, give her this. It's a tracker. We need to know when they move her." A loud buzzer sounded through the facility. Exercise time was over. "One more thing," Ollie said quickly. "Tomorrow's arena match. They're putting you against their champion, Kraz. He's never lost, but he's also never fought for more than 10 minutes." He grinned. "Think you can last longer than that?" Davidson thought about Marine Corps endurance training. 20-mile runs with full packs, hours in the desert heat, days without sleep during operations. "I can last as long as I need to." Later that night, in his room, Davidson studied the data they'd given him. Alderaan weakness points, guard patrol patterns, power cycle times. A plan was forming in his mind. His door chimed, and Lord Bedford walked in. "Ah, Sergeant, ready for tomorrow's big match. Kraz is quite excited to face you." "Just another day at the office, sir," Davidson replied calmly. Bedford laughed. "That's what I like about you, Davidson. Always so confident." He walked to the window overlooking the arena. "You know, some humans would kill for the life we have here. The Alderaans treat their valuable assets very well. Is that what happened to you, sir? They treated you well?" Bedford's smile faded slightly. "I made a choice to work with the superior species, to help humanity find its proper place in the galaxy." He turned to leave. "Do try to give Kraz a good show tomorrow. It would be a shame if anything happened to Miss Blackwood because you underperformed." After Bedford left, Davidson lay on his bed, thinking. The Alderaans were strong but couldn't fight long. Their systems needed regular recharging. Their guards worked in short shifts because they tired easily. All his life, people had told him humans were too weak, too small, too fragile to survive in space. But maybe they had it backwards. Maybe what looked like weakness was actually strength. Tomorrow, he would show them what human endurance really meant. And after that, he smiled in the darkness. After that, the real marathon would begin. The arena was packed. Thousands of aliens filled every seat, and millions more watched on screens across the Alderaan Empire. This was the championship match everyone had been waiting for. Kraz, the undefeated alien champion, versus the strange human who solved problems in unexpected ways. Davidson stood in the preparation room, doing simple stretches. Dr. Whitmore checked his vital signs one last time. "Remember," she whispered, "Kraz has never fought past 10 minutes. The longest any opponent lasted was 8 minutes and 30 seconds. Davidson nodded. How long until the power cycle? 2 hours and 15 minutes from now. She pressed something small into his hand. Painkillers. You'll need them. The door opened, and Lord Bedford walked in with 2 guards. It's time, Sergeant. Try not to die too quickly. He smiled coldly. Miss Blackwood is watching today. Wouldn't want to disappoint her. The arena floor had been changed. Instead of obstacles, there was just a large circle marked in blue light. The rules were simple. Stay in the circle, stay standing. Last one on their feet wins. Kraz entered from the other side. He was enormous, even for an Alderaan, with muscles that looked like they could bend steel. The crowd roared as he raised his arms. Begin. The announcer's voice boomed. Kraz charged immediately, trying to end the fight quickly like all his others. But Davidson wasn't there anymore. He had stepped aside at the last second, letting the alien's momentum carry him forward. Stand and fight, human. Kraz roared, turning around. Davidson kept moving, staying just out of reach. He remembered Dr. Whitmore's words about Alderaan biology. Every explosive movement cost them energy that they couldn't easily replace. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Davidson had taken some hits. It was impossible to dodge everything from someone that strong and fast. But he was still moving, still making Kraz work for every step. In the VIP box, Lord Bedford leaned forward. Something's wrong. The human isn't even trying to attack. 15 minutes in, Kraz's movements started getting slower. His breathing was heavy, and his attacks were becoming wild. The crowd had gone from cheering to confused muttering. They'd never seen their champion look tired before. What's happening to him? An Alderaan official demanded. Human endurance, Bedford said quietly, finally understanding Davidson's plan. They're not trying to match our strength. They never were. 20 minutes. Kraz was gasping for air, his mighty arms hanging heavy. Davidson had cuts and bruises, but he kept moving, his marine training pushing him through the pain. The crowd was silent now, watching something they'd never seen before. How? Kraz managed to say between breaths. How are you still moving? Davidson answered by quoting his old drill instructor. Pain is just weakness leaving the body. 25 minutes. Kraz fell to one knee, then both. His arms dropped, and he couldn't stand back up. The mighty alien champion had finally met something he couldn't overpower, human stamina. The arena was completely silent as Davidson walked up to his fallen opponent. Following the traditional Alderaan victory gesture he'd learned from Dr. Whitmore, he helped Kraz to his feet. Fight. Well, human. Kraz gasped out, showing respect in defeat. The silence broke. The crowd erupted in cheers, not just for the victory, but for seeing something entirely new. Screens across the empire showed the same thing. A human, standing tall while their strongest champion had to be helped from the arena. In the medical bay afterward, Dr. Whitmore bandaged Davidson's injuries. Perfect timing, she whispered. The power cycle starts in 10 minutes. Everyone will be talking about the match. Nobody will be watching the security feeds. Davidson nodded, wincing as she cleaned a cut. Tell Ollie and Thomas to be ready. And make sure Emma gets the signal. He looked at the clock. It's time to show them what else humans can do. The revolution was about to begin, and it would start not with superior strength, but with the quiet power of human endurance. The facility's lights dimmed slightly, exactly as Thomas had predicted. The power cycle was beginning. Davidson lay on his bed, counting seconds in his head. 1, 2, 3. The force field at his door flickered and died. He was moving before it came back on, slipping into the corridor like a shadow. Years of marine training made his footsteps silent despite his injuries from the arena match. Guards change in 30 seconds. Ollie's voice came through the tiny earpiece Dr. Whitmore had given him. Maintenance shaft access is 20 meters ahead on your left. Davidson reached the shaft just as heavy footsteps echoed from around the corner. He pulled the panel open and slid inside, closing it behind him just as two Alderaan guards walked past. "Thomas here," a new voice whispered in his ear. "I've got the camera feeds looped. You've got 4 minutes to reach level B3. The maintenance shaft was tight, designed for the facility's robotic repair units rather than people. Davidson ignored his bruised muscles and kept moving. Down 3 levels, then across. He'd memorized the route during his exercise periods, checking the layout against the plans Thomas had stolen. "Update," Dr. Whitmore's voice came through. "Emma's tracker shows she's being moved. They're taking her to Bedford's office." Davidson cursed silently. That wasn't part of the plan. "Can we still reach the ship?" "Yes, but timing will be tight. The next power cycle is in 40 minutes. He reached level B3 and carefully opened the shaft panel. The corridor was empty, but he could hear voices from Bedford's office around the corner. "The humans' victory is causing problems." Bedford's voice drifted out. "The public is asking questions. They want to know more about human capabilities." "Then we'll show them," another voice replied. "Hi, Commander Krell. Start the mass collection program. If one human can do this, imagine what we could learn from thousands." Davidson had heard enough. He touched his earpiece. "Change of plans. We move now." "But the power cycle," Thomas started. "No time. They're planning to take more humans. Signal the others." He heard Bedford's door opening and pressed himself against the wall. Emma walked out first, followed by Bedford and Krell. Davidson noticed she was wearing the white armband. The resistance had reached her. "Now," he shouted, jumping forward. Everything happened at once. The lights went out completely as Thomas overloaded the power grid. Emergency alarms blared. From all over the facility, the sounds of chaos erupted as other prisoners made their moves. Davidson grabbed Emma and pulled her away from Bedford. Krell moved with surprising speed despite his size, but Davidson had learned from fighting Kraz. He dodged the alien's grab and pushed Emma toward the maintenance shaft. "How dare you?" Bedford shouted, reaching for a weapon. But Ollie appeared behind him, having climbed up through another shaft, and knocked the traitor unconscious with a single punch. "Nice timing," Davidson said. "Always liked making an entrance." Ollie grinned. "Now move. Thomas says we got 5 minutes before backup power kicks in." They ran through darkened corridors, guided by Dr. Whitmore's voice in their earpieces. Other humans joined them. Scientists, soldiers, civilians. The resistance had been larger than even Davidson had known. "The hangar is ahead," Dr. Whitmore said. "We've got a ship ready." Thomas uploaded a virus into their defense systems 10 minutes ago. They burst into the hangar just as the emergency lights came on. A sleek transport ship sat ready, its ramp down. Dr. Whitmore stood at the controls, wearing a stolen guard's uniform. Bedford was right about one thing, Emma said as they ran for the ship. "They should have studied humans more carefully. Not our muscles, our ability to work together, to plan, to adapt." Davidson helped her up the ramp, looking back at the chaos they'd caused. Alarms still blared, and he could hear confused shouting in alien languages. "Time to go home," he said. But as the ship's engines fired up, he knew this wasn't over. The Alderaans had underestimated humans once. They wouldn't make that mistake again. 3 months after the escape, Davidson stood in a very different room. The United Earth Embassy on the Alderaan capital world stretched high into the purple alien sky, its design a mix of human and Alderaan architecture. Through the window, he could see ships from both species moving through the air, peaceful now. "Ready for this?" Emma asked, straightening his marine dress uniform. As Earth's new chief diplomat to the Alderaan Empire, she had helped arrange today's meeting. "Ready as I'll ever be," Davidson replied. The door opened, and a familiar face walked in. Kraz, the former arena champion, looked different in diplomatic clothes. The alien warrior nodded respectfully to Davidson. "The council is waiting," Kraz said. "Many still don't understand how you did it. That's why we're here today." Emma smiled. They walked into the council chamber together. Dr. Whitmore was already there, standing at a podium with her research displayed on large screens. The escaped humans had brought back more than just themselves. They'd brought data, years of research about both species. As you can see, Dr. Whitmore was saying, human endurance isn't a weakness or a trick. It's an evolutionary advantage. We can keep going long after stronger species need to rest. The Alderan council members watched intently as she showed videos from the arena. Davidson recognized himself in some of them, along with other human prisoners who had found creative ways to overcome seemingly impossible challenges. But physical endurance isn't our only strength. Emma stepped forward. What happened in the arena facility proved something else. Humans don't just endure physically. We adapt, we work together, we plan for the long game. Thomas, now Earth's chief technology advisor for alien relations, pulled up new data. The resistance succeeded because we studied and learned. We turned your own power system's weakness into our advantage. We didn't try to overpower you. We simply waited for the right moment. And that, Davidson spoke for the first time, is what humanity does best. We observe, we adapt, we endure, and we work together. Ollie, wearing a formal British military uniform, stood next to him. The arena was supposed to prove human weakness. Instead, it proved that measuring only physical strength misses the bigger picture. High Commander Krell, who had supported the changes after the escape, addressed the council. We thought we were studying them, but they were studying us. And while we watched their muscles, we missed their minds. The council chamber was quiet for a moment. Then the head counselor stood. 3 months ago, we thought humans were primitive creatures who had somehow stumbled into space. Today, we sign a new treaty, not as superior and inferior species, but as equals. Davidson watched as Emma and the counselor signed the documents. The treaty established new laws about human rights in Alderan space, banned involuntary testing, and set up proper sporting events where both species could compete safely. Later, at the celebration, Kraz approached Davidson with 2 drinks. You know, the alien said, I'm glad you beat me that day. It taught us all something important. Davidson took the offered drink. What's that? That true strength isn't about how hard you can hit. Kraz smiled. It's about how long you can stand. Dr. Whitmore joined them, along with Emma, Ollie, and Thomas. They had all changed since their days in the arena. Their experiences had forged something new, not just friendship, but understanding between species. To endurance, Emma raised her glass. To working together, added Ollie. To humanity, Dr. Whitmore smiled. Davidson looked out at the mixed crowd of humans and Alderans. The arena had tried to prove human weakness. Instead, it had revealed human strength, not just in muscles and stamina, but in determination, adaptation, and unity. To the future, he said, raising his glass. May we all keep learning from each other. As the celebrations continued around him, Davidson thought about how far they'd come. The Alderans had wanted to understand human endurance. In the end, they'd discovered something far more important, that true strength comes in many forms, and the greatest victories aren't won by power alone, but by the ability to keep going, to adapt, and to stand together.